Welcome to my workshop titled Building a Deep Mapping Mobile Application, Mobile Technologies for Deep Mapping and Beyond. What is the beyond? Well, we will figure that out a little later. I have something in store for you today that I think you will all find very interesting at the least. We're going to cover a little bit of setting up a mobile application based on the Ket mobile shell, and then we're going to look at some other coding examples. And we might even get a little bit into some of the out-of-box Esri stuff. So for those of you that don't know me, I am Bob Kelling, GIS data librarian here at Michigan Tech. What are we going to do today? I'd like to make a little agenda just so everybody knows what to expect. I'm going to give everyone an introduction to Ket Mobile. I know a lot of you at the Institute use Ket Mobile extensively, but for those of you that were not at the in-person portion of the Institute, I will go through it briefly. And then I'm going to do a historical GIS mobile application workshop walkthrough where we will create some story points and invisible index map layers, digitize some index map polygons, and configure and deploy your very own mobile application. We'll then look at some other examples of how do you actually add data to the mobile application and other coding examples for deep mapping. And then we may take a look at creating a deep map with out-of-the-box Esri tools. Is it possible? We will see. I'm not sure if we're doing Institute announcements. Those may have already happened. So in this workshop, you're going to create your own deep mapping mobile application using a shell based off of our Ket mobile. The only thing that you need to do in this workshop is edit a configuration file that will control the look and feel of your app. Just for the record, this is a low coding workshop. You do not need to know programming, but if you do, it would certainly be helpful. So what is Ket Mobile exactly? A mobile storytelling application allowing users to explore the Keweenaw through historical maps and user-submitted stories, so users can walk around the landscape displaying maps at their geographic location or submit stories at their current location or from a location they pick on the map. They can also upload media such as audio or video. And if you want to look at that on your phone, you can just go to keweenawhistory.com and check that out. Let's take a look quickly here at this workshop format. This is a 3-part workshop. Don should have sent you the documents last night as PDF files. Part 1 covers setting up the development environment. This is just mainly software installation, like a code editor, web server, GitHub desktop, things like that. Basically, the very starting point of your application. And then we're going to work on setting up some layers in ArcGIS Portal or ArcGIS Online. In this case, we need 2 layers, a layer for public story submissions and an invisible map index layer. Then finally, part 3 is actually creating your app through configuration and deployment. So we're going to set up or clone the actual Ket mobile to our desktop. And then I'm going to do an overview of the repository code. We can edit the configuration file, style the application, and finally deploy it on GitHub pages so you can each have your own individual and unique mobile application. So I just want to take a look here quickly, and I'm going to be back and forth a lot between screens. The first part right here, we are not going through this today, but this is essentially just setting up a development environment, including downloading and installing Visual Studio Code text editor, GitHub desktop client, and you'll create a GitHub account. So very simple, just download and install these applications on the operating system of your choice. One thing I really like about Visual Studio Code is that it has a live server extension. So essentially a built-in web server where you can deploy your app in a development environment and view changes in real time. Otherwise, you could do this without Visual Studio Code with something like Sublime Text Editor, along with something like WAMP server. Setting up a GitHub account is completely free. And then when you set up your GitHub account, you can log into the GitHub desktop client. You will need a GitHub account to log into the GitHub desktop client. All right, so I just want to go over some software and technical terms so you're all not too lost with what I'm talking about. GitHub is a developer platform where users can create, share, manage, and store their code. You've certainly all probably heard of GitHub repositories. It's very common. There are certainly other developer platforms out there as well. GitHub is one of the most popular ones. And Visual Studio Code is simply a free text editor for making changes to code. What we are dealing with in this app is a JSON configuration, which just stands for JavaScript Object Notation, which is a data format which stores key value pairs. It's a commonly used data format in web applications. Basically, any sort of website that you're dealing with that's dealing with some sort of data input, retrieving data, it's all coming back to the browser in JSON. Of course, JavaScript is everywhere, programming language of the web. This is essentially what makes your app do cool things, interactivity, right? You click on something, some sort of an action occurs, cascading style sheets, the look and feel of the application, colors, sizes, like text size, box size. HTML, everyone's probably familiar with this. Hypertext markup language, basically, the structure of a website. What is the website made out of? The website's overall components. So requirements for this, when you're doing this workshop, you will need ArcGIS portal, and you can certainly use ours, and you are encouraged to do that at the Geospatial Research Facility, or you can use your own instance of portal or ArcGIS online. You'll need a GitHub account, the GitHub desktop client, Visual Studio Code with live server extension, and you will need two georeference maps cached as tile layers or tile caches. These can come from maps that you've georeferenced previously on our version of Map Warper, ArcGIS Portal, or ArcGIS Online as tile layers. And Team Sao Paulo, I know you will be very happy to know I did test this out with your GeoServer XYZ tiles, and it does work flawlessly. So this was from the old workshop. You don't necessarily need to do this. I mean, if I'm boring you, feel free to go sign up for a GitHub account. I don't mind. First thing we're going to do here, and this is the start. So if you're following along, you can just watch me or you can follow along with the guides. I'm only going to use one screen here because I'm on a very small laptop and I don't want to go tablet style. So I will bring this up. We're looking at part 2, setting up layers. So what we're going to do here is set up a points layer in ArcGIS portal for user submitted stories. That's going to be the first step. So I'm starting right here, setting up your story points layer. And I'm going to walk through this, setting up fields until we get to setting up an index map layer. So let's proceed. What we're going to do is set up new layers for user submitted story submissions and invisible index map. I'll talk about the invisible index map briefly in a little bit, but first I want to set up the user submitted stories. So I'm just going to go to ArcGIS portal, content tab. I'm assuming most of you, at least that were at the in-person institute, are fairly comfortable with this, as it was the workshop that James did on digitizing. This is going to be mostly a repeat of that. So simply, I'm in my content here. I'm going to click on the new item button. And what I want to do is I want to create a new feature layer. What do you want to do? I want to build a layer myself. So I'm going to click on build a layer. And in this case, for the user submitted story submissions, they're going to be points. So I'm going to create a new point layer, click the create button, leave everything as is here. And I can set the extent. This would be the extent of the area that your deep mapping project covers. In my case, I'll just do the good old Keweenaw Peninsula. All right, so you can enter a title here. I'll put Houghton Deep Map story submissions. I'm just going to call this Houghton Deep Map. As always, metadata is very important, and I highly recommend that you fill all of this stuff out, but I'm not going to do any of that today. So when you have a title here, you can click Done, and ArcGIS Portal will create this layer for you. Come on, Portal. You can do it. Oh, Portal. Ah, there we go. Excellent. All right, so now that this is set up here, you can see our layer's been created and you can input additional metadata if you want to. I'm going to go to the Data tab, and next we're going to set up some fields. Now, this is a very important step in the workshop, setting up fields. You'll see a couple of tabs over here. We need to create new fields. So click on the Fields tab, and we're going to go to Add. These fields right here are what ArcGIS Portal has created automatically. You don't need to make any sort of changes to them. They can just stay as is. So looking at our tutorial here, way ahead of myself. So looking at page number 6, right, we have a table with field name, display name, type, and length. These are the fields that we need to create in this new story submission points layer. Now, it's very important that these titles, that these field names, display names, types, they all match exactly what's in this table. They should all be lowercase. They should all be a type of string. If they do not match exactly, then the mobile application is not going to be able to read this correctly, and you'll experience errors in your code. So going back through this, I'm just going to add these fields, starting with title. This is the title of the story that the user is submitting, and the type is a string, length is 256. Length is the number of characters in this field. Click Add New Field. Okay, and you can see this field has now been created. I'm going to do this about 5 more times. This is a field for description. This is basically the body of the user story submission, right? The text. Now, the length for this, I'm going to put 3,000. Maybe they really want to submit a giant lengthy story here, and that's perfectly fine with me. If you have 256 characters, they're not going to be able to type a lot. So I will go in here and add this field. Next, I'll do the field for name. This is the person's name that is submitting the story. I know it's a long, slow process. I just want to reiterate how important this is to make sure that it's right. And the next field is user date. This is the date that the user is going to put in of when their story took place, during which time period. It could take a year, like 1944, it could take a month, day, year. So that's why we have it as a string type. It could take a lot of values, and the code automatically handles parsing out that data and knowing what to do with it automatically. Okay, this is a flag field. We actually don't use this, but it is used in the Q1 Time Traveler desktop to be able to flag story submissions that are inappropriate or you do not want them. We currently don't use this, but I expect it will be implemented in the future. Okay, and finally here, I'm going to add an attribute here for map. This basically records the service URL of the map that the user is looking at when they submit the story. So that way, if they share a story via URL, it will automatically bring that map up in the application along with the story. Okay, so when you're done, everything should look something like this. Just double checking this. Everything looks good. I'm going to go back to the Overview tab, and then I'm going to go to Settings. And what I want to do is I want to approve this layer for public data collection. This means that anyone on here could submit a story or add a point essentially to this application. It doesn't have to be me or an administrator portal. It could be anyone from the public. I'm going to enable editing, but what I want to, and I'm going to say actually save this first, okay? And then I'm going to enable editing. And what do I want the user to be able to do? I only want them to be able to add things, right? I don't want them to be able to delete other people's stories, or I don't want them to be able to update other people's stories. So I'm going to click save. I'm going to go back to the overview tab, and I'm going to change the sharing level here to everyone public. Click save. You're probably going to get a warning. You're making this layer publicly shareable. Click update. All right. Go back to content. There we go. That's all we need for that one. Next, we're going to set up the invisible index map layer. So what is this exactly? Oh, it's a polygon layer used to populate the maps list in the mobile application based off of maps that are only at the user's current extent. So this is basically the extent of the map that the user is currently looking at. It's essentially querying against a layer of polygons, right? Which polygons are intersecting currently with the map's current extent. So you can see an example of this on Ket Mobile itself, right? Right here you have 68 maps. So as I start to zoom in, right, the maps get less and less because there's fewer maps in this area, fewer polygons intersecting the map's current extent, right? So a lot of this, we have maps that cover a larger area. So you're getting more maps here. When you zoom in, these maps are only covering like, the city of Houghton or a few blocks. So you get less maps. Now, I mean, okay, that's interesting, right? What does this actually look like? Right, we call it an invisible index map layer. So here's what it actually looks like in on the back end without any sort of like transparency set on this. Just a crazy number of polygons, and each one of these that you are seeing is the outlined extent of each historical map in your application. Right, so now you can have a better idea of what I was just showing you. All of these maps here that cover a large extent, so you have 60 some, then you start to zoom in and you start to get only these, and the little ones over here are not showing up, right? See, I would get these three maps right here. These larger ones are intersecting, all based on the map's current extent. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? Okay. All right, so I'm going to go back to ArcGIS portal here. Now we're going to do the same thing we just did, but we're going to do a polygon layer, right? Build a layer. This time I want to do polygons. Call this Houghton Heat Map Spatial Index layer. Going to click Done. Taking a while to create a layer here for some reason. Or, there we go. Okay. So now the first thing I want to do in this layer is I want to go to settings and I need to enable editing on this, but it's also going to want public data collection due to some limitation of our portal that's on 10.9.1. If you are on ArcGIS Online, you probably won't have to do this. Okay, head back here to the Overview tab, and I'm going to open this in Map Viewer. Okay, so what I need to do now is I need to add some historical georeference maps, or historical tile layers, I should say. So these could come from Map Warper, ArcGIS Online, GeoServer. But I have some right here that I've pre-prepared. I have a couple of sheets, Houghton Sanborn 1900 and Houghton Sanborn 1917. So I can find these on Map Warper, and you can find the tile URL under the Export tab under any single map or mosaic. I'm going to copy this. Losing my tabs here. All right, going to add this layer as a tile layer. URL, I'll paste the URL into this URL field. This is a XYZ tile layer coming from Map Warper. Sanborn 1900, attribution, Library of Congress. Add to map, I will zoom into Houghton. There is my tile layer. Going to go back to the layers panel. I'm going to drag my spatial index layer on top of it so it's not covered. And now I'm going to edit this layer. Okay, I'm going to click add feature, and all I'm going to do is simply digitize a rough polygon around this historical map. Now, you don't want to spend a lot of time on this. It can just be a very rough outline. You don't want to have a lot of vertices here because it's going to take a long time to load. And let's say you have hundreds or thousands of historical maps in here at some point, the less vertices, the better. So I'll just digitize this counterclockwise, clicking at each corner of the map till I get back to the original point, in which I will double click and finish the polygon. I'm going to click add to finish. Something has gone haywire here. Take a look at my attribute table. Oh, you know why? Because I forgot to set up the attributes. So we're going to go back to content. Yes, I can leave this. Going to go back to my index layer, going to go to the data tab, going to go to fields, and now I need to add 3 different fields. So looking at the guide on page 11, you can see that the fields are title, map year, and service URL, all of a string type. Accidentally got a space in there. So this is simply the title of the historical map that you're digitizing in your index layer. Now I'm going to add map year. This is the year of the historical map. Finally, I'm going to add the service URL. And this is the service URL of the historical map, which comes from GeoPortal, Map Warper, or GeoServer. Okay, let's try this one more time. Open it up in Map Viewer. I already have that polygon, so I should just be able to edit it if everything goes well. Or not. I can edit it using the attribute table, hopefully. Yep. Okay, so I will just put Sanborn map, map year, 1900. Something is going on here that I do not like. Okay, let's go to settings. You can see Portal is very picky about permissions. I'm guessing that this is a problem that update and delete are not added, but we will take a look. Okay, that was indeed the problem. As you can see, sometimes you have to troubleshoot this stuff with permissions, but luckily we were able to easily figure it out here. Okay, so I just pasted the service URL from Map Warper right into here under the service URL field. I will click Update. All right. Now I'm going to add Sanborn 1917. Once again, go to the Export tab in Map Warper. I will copy the tile URL. And I'm going to add a tile layer, paste in the URL, add to map. Okay, and now I'm just going to go through and I'm going to digitize this one as well. Let's make 4 little vertices here on each corner. And I'm doing this with individual map sheets, but you could do this with a mosaic as well, or an individual map. If you're doing a mosaic, you wouldn't just digitize the individual map sheets, but the entire mosaic should be one single polygon. Title is Sanborn Map. Map here, 1917. Paste in the URL. Click Add. To our Layers tab. Down. There we go. We have 2 index polygons. Maybe I want to do one from ArcGIS Portal now. So ArcGIS Portal, ArcGIS Online, basically the same thing here as far as getting the service URL. This is a 1913 map of Houghton water system. You can just get the service URL right here and copy it. And now I'm going to bring this one in just as a web service. Okay, because it's coming from ArcGIS Portal. It's not XYZ tiles. Add to map, and now I get this huge mosaic of the Houghton water system. All right, go back to my layers tab, bring this one up, and I'm going to digitize this. Like I said, just roughly digitize, and where you want to digitize is totally up to you. You could do it way up here and remove all this black space here, because I mean, that's not really going to show a user anything. This doesn't need to be exact. I mean, this is a large mosaic we're dealing with here. All right, fewer vertices, the better. And I think that looks pretty good. All right. Title system, 1913, service URL, same URL that we got from ArcGIS Portal. Click Add. And now we can go back to content. All right. So now that we have our layer set up, that completes step number 2 or part 2 of this guide. Are there any questions about any of that stuff?
Don't see any in the chat right now, Bob.
Okay. Well, that's good. All right, we're all doing good then. I think we can. I don't want to rush through this, but I think we can move on to part number 3 then. Just going to take a look at part 3 here. This is where we are actually going to clone the repository and configure and deploy our application. So, like I said previously, you will need a GitHub account for this, mainly because you need to clone the repository. So I will come back to this later. All right. So open up GitHub desktop client. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a clone of this repository, or essentially a copy of this repository to my local machine. So I'll just look at this really quick here on GitHub, right? This is our GitHub repository. You can see all of these files. This is what we're going to clone. All of these individual files and folders make up this particular web app. All right. I can also get the URL from here, but it's also in part 3 of the guide. So I'll just copy this to clipboard. I'm going to come back to GitHub Desktop. I'm going to go to File, clone repository, and then I'm going to go to URL. Okay. Paste the URL into here. And then you'll choose a path on your local computer to clone this to. I am going to clone it to my workshop folder in this case. And I'm going to hit the clone button. All right. Now GitHub Desktop has made a clone of this. You have the option right here, if you have Visual Studio Code installed, to simply now open this repository right in the text editor. It was also cloned to your hard drive. So, right, you can see the folder here, HGIS mobile app, and here are all the files. So I could open it from GitHub Desktop, but I'm just going to open it in Visual Studio Code manually to show you that process. Okay, so here's our text editor, Visual Studio Code. I'm going to go to File, Open Folder. I'm going to go to my desktop. I'm going to click on the folder, select folder, and now you'll see the directory and all of its contents over here in the left sidebar. So let's take a look at this individually real quick. App.js contains all of the application's JavaScript code. The config.json file is the one file that you will be editing, and I will come back to this. Index.html contains the HTML for the application, and style.css contains all of the styling. Now, this is designed so you don't have to touch app.js, style.css, or index.html. Everything comes from this configuration file. You also have a folder in here called assets. This is where things like logos, banners are stored. And I've made you a nice selection of SVG markers to pick from here for stories, video, right? You have all of these available to use to kind of give everyone's app a different look and feel. Okay, so let's take a look at the config.json file. This is where we are going to spend our time here. Essentially, this is a JSON configuration with JSON elements and properties that control things like the map's extent, the base map, the map zoom level, the navigation bar color, logo, text, and most importantly, the map's layers. Okay, this is where the URLs go from those two layers that we just created on our JS portal. You can also specify custom markers for your story if you want a splash screen. Pretty much anything can be customized as far as color goes. You can also add some links to the hamburger menu in the app. Okay, so I'm just going to start editing this. But first I want to go over, okay, so how do you find the map's extent? How do you find the default zoom level? This is the extent and zoom level that's going to show when you first load your application, right? Where is this at in the world? And what sort of an extent do you want to show? And that's going to depend a lot on your data, right? If you only have maps that cover like a city or a few streets, you're going to want your zoom level to be high, right? You're going to want to be zoomed way in. But if your maps are covering like, the entire United States, you're going to want to be zoomed out a lot more. So let's take a look at this really quick. So we're going to discuss zoom levels a little bit here. I'm assuming most of you are at least familiar with map scale. Some people that don't really use web maps a lot don't really tend to understand zoom levels just because they don't understand how it like necessarily correlates to scale. And that's okay because Google Maps kind of makes this easy. And zoom levels often for Esri vector-based maps go to 0 to 23, right? With low zoom levels like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, showing continents, states, countries. And as you zoom more into mid zoom levels, you start to see major cities and roads, on web maps. High zoom levels to show individual streets and buildings. Now, at the same time, finding geographic coordinates made relatively easy by Google My Maps, right? So this is Google My Maps, and what I really like about this is you can see up in the address bar as you're zooming around at any point, it's giving you the map center and the map zoom level, right? You can see this, it's updating, it's constantly updating, right? I'm at zoom level 3 right now. You see what kinds of, we can see continents, we can see the names of countries, right? But we don't see major cities, we don't see roads. Start to zoom in, you're going 5, roads start to appear, right? Now we're seeing the outlines of like reservations and things like that at zoom level 7, as well as secondary roads. Keep zooming in. We're seeing more and more until I'm getting all the way down to street level, which we're at about zoom level 14 right now. So what do I want to show? Right? It's just a Houghton deep map. And I mean, any point you can just right click at any point and get the latitude and longitude, right? So, but right here we have, latitude, longitude, zoom level. This is telling me it's 14.25. I'll just take 14 or 15. So first thing I'm going to do is copy the west longitude right here. Going to go back in to VS Code, and I'm going to paste it into this array, right? Right now it's 0, 0. The first value is always longitude, and the second value is always latitude, separated by a comma. Go back here and copy the latitude. Okay. Now I think I want to be about zoom level 15. And types of things that are important here is you need to make sure so you don't mess up the syntax, right? So if something is between quotation marks, then it needs to have quotation marks around it. It needs to have a comma after it. And if you make a mistake, do something you don't like, you can just hit Control Z and it'll go back. If you're happy with your work, you can hit Control S and that will save, or you can just go to File Save like pretty much any other program. All right. So let's go in here now. I'm going to change the title of my application. Well, actually, first, why don't we just take a look and see what this application actually looks like? Does it even work? All right. So if you right click on index.html and you can select Open with Live Server, this is why the Live Server extension is so great, right? I can view this live. There it is. It's a mobile application. And it works. Now, this just has standard layers in here that are coming from things like the QAnon Time Traveler. So you see a lot of maps in here, getting some undefined values. Okay. And if you want it to look more like a mobile app, you can hit Shift Control I, bring up the Dev Console, Shift Control I, and just drag a little bit. There we go. That looks nice, right? All right. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code and make some more changes. I want to change the app's title. I'm going to call it Houghton Deep Map. Background color. All right, so we have some things for background color. Background color can take hex values. It can take RGBA. It can take the name of a color. Maybe I just want the background here to be black. I can just type literally the name of the color in here. And I'm going to save it. And I'm going to come back in here. And you can see these changes are reflected in real time. Okay. So what do I want to do next? Maybe, these kind of things, these historical GIS applications, deep mapping applications, they tend to work a lot better when you're using satellite or, what does the landscape really look like? not a vector representation, right? Let's get some aerial imagery on here. Oh yeah, much better, right? And you can use a lot of different base maps. I think somewhere in this guide, I have a list in part three of the names of base maps you could use, like Esri Oceans, Dark Streets, things like that. All right, I'm gonna go back to Visual Studio Code now. What do I want to do? I don't want a splash screen, so I can change this to false and the splash screen won't show up. But hello, Sarah. Welcome to the event. Glad of you to join us. So right now, the most important part of this is we need to add those service URLs in here that we made from ArcGIS Portal. Okay, so this is extremely important. I'm going to go back to my content and I can see a problem already. If this is not public, it will not work. You're going to get prompted for a login. So that's the first thing I need to fix is I need to go right in here and I need to change this to public visibility. So I'm going to share this item with everyone. All right, we are rolling along here. Once again, I'm going to go down here to this URL section, and this is the service layer for the URL of this spatial indexes map. Going to click copy, go back to VS Code and index layer URL. Okay, I'm going to remove the current one. Going to paste this in here, and it's always /0. Make sure you add /0 on the end or it will not work. All right, I can save. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to add my story submissions layer. Back in content here. Go back to VS Code. Story submissions layer. I'm going to be careful not to remove these quotations here. Paste it in here. /0. Save. Right click. Oh, it was already open, but okay. Now you can see I have some maps down here, right? 3 maps. And things are looking good so far. Here we go. Incredible. So now we have a working application. Well, we think. So let's submit a story, right? Test out the story submission. I'm at home, so I'm not. I'm going to use a location from the map. Zoom in here, hold down. Going to upload some media. Ooh, what do I have here? Chat GPT image? I don't know what this is, but I'm going to use it. All right. Chat GPT. I really love AI, and you're going to see that in my presentation. So the story's title, what is this? CDMI workshop. We're doing this right now, 2025. Submit the story. Story has been submitted, my friends. Going back to the Explore tab. And there we have it. There is my story, and it appears as though I have there it is. An AI generated photo of this actual application. Thank you, ChatGPT, for making my life easy. All right. Now, what do I want to do? I can't leave you with this. We need more. So I'm going to go back to my friend here, VS Code. And what do I want to do? Maybe I want to add my own logo. Okay, let's say I want to add my own logo. I'm going to go to my desktop and I have this image here. I want to add the MTU Husky logo to this. I'm going to copy this image into my assets folder, right? Husky.png. I'm going to go back here and now I'm going to add this, change this URL here. Ta-da! There you go. Now, right, it's starting to look more and more like my own mobile app. More and more, less like a shell, like a clone. Okay? You could add a different story marker if you want to. So what do we have available here? Story marker URL. Could add that. Let's see what else we could do here. Don't want a splash screen. Could change the links a little bit. I think that's pretty straightforward. But, right, change the title. You can change the color of the GPS button. So one thing I want to show you here is this right here on page 21, page 20 on, right? Section of styling your application. This tells you the name of each JSON element, its description, like what does this do? What does this change? And what some of the values and what the values are that it takes, right? So we can see the maps extent takes latitude and longitude, or longitude and latitude in that order. Here we have the Esri base map IDs. We use satellite, but you have all of these available for you to use. Map zoom level, logo, your story pop-ups, progress bar. You can edit so much on here, and this is a great way to do that. I'm not going to cover nearly all of this, and then it also gives you a breakdown of how exactly to add links. Do you want to add extra links or remove links? Okay, so what do we need to do now? The final step is we need to publish this onto our GitHub repository. So if you open the GitHub desktop client again, you can see that GitHub has noted that you have made changes to these files, right? It's telling you what sort of changes you made. You removed something, you added something. I added a logo, I made these changes to the code. So I'm going to, well, what you're going to see down here is the first thing you're going to see is you don't have write access to HGIS mobile app. This is simply telling you that you do not own the repository. In this case, the MTU GRF owns the repository. What you want to do is you want to create a fork. So I'm going to click on create a fork. If you want to fork this repository, fork this repository. This repository is a fork. How do you plan to use it? I plan to use it for my own purposes, right? I don't want to make any contributions to the original project. Click continue. Add a description. I'm just updating config.json and adding a logo. Now I'm going to make a commit. This means I'm committing changes to the code that are going to be reflected in the repository itself. And I'm committing to the main branch. You could have, in a repository, you could have several branches, like branches that are for development, where you could make changes that would not have any effect on what is happening in the actual live application. And when you're ready, you can merge those edits into the main branch. So if you want to learn a lot about GitHub, there's some links in the tutorials here that will tell you where you can go and learn all about GitHub, how it works, and how to use it in different terminology. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit push origin here. This essentially is going to push these changes to the actual repository on GitHub off of my computer. Okay. So we can see that this repository, these changes have been committed and has been pushed to GitHub. Now you can see this is my own GitHub, right? I'm not in MTU GRF. It's telling me that it was forked from MTU GRF. But this is my own GitHub account, and this repository now exists here, right? Along with some other repositories. So I'll just go and click here, and I'm gonna go into the repository. And what I want to do is I want to make a GitHub page out of this, so we can access it live via URL. So I'm going to go to settings up here, and I'm going to go to pages, and then build and deployment. What do I want to deploy from? I want to deploy from a branch. Which branch is that? The main branch. Okay. This is the main branch that holds all of the code that we just pushed to the repository. I'm going to click save. And now GitHub Pages should be creating a page for this. So do you absolutely need GitHub Pages? No, absolutely you do not. If you want to deploy this on your own web server, feel free to do that. You could just take this into your own dev environment and deploy it on your own web server somewhere. You don't need GitHub Pages. Okay. So if all goes well, my code should be available here as a live web page. It usually takes GitHub about 10 minutes to build these things. I'm not going to sit here and wait around for it. Um, so it's always the URL is always your username.github.io. It would be /HJS mobile app. Okay, so it is there, right? Okay, so you have now deployed your live application. Are there any questions about any of this stuff? That concludes the workshop portion of this.
Bob, there were a couple questions that I think I addressed in the chat there. If you want to just take a quick look at them and see if there's anything else you want to mention about them.
No, I would say a screen resolution on a mobile phone would probably appear different based on zoom levels, Angela, if that's what you're asking.
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, you probably it's not going to look exactly the same as it would on desktop. I would definitely recommend testing it on mobile or just shift control I in the browser and then narrowing the window down.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So I don't know if you asked this question before I got to it, but the base map list is in the documentation at the end of part three of the mobile app. You'll see the list there that's satellite, oceans. Does that answer your question, Todd?
Yes, and I did ask it before you got to it, and I saw your list, and I'm familiar with most of those. I just wanted to make sure that's what you are actually pulling from.
Okay. Yep. Yep. That's exactly where they come from. All right.
So I have another question, and maybe you're going
Sure.
to get to this. So now that you have deployed this on GitHub and you can go from there, what's the next step to get it as a mobile-friendly app that you can use on either your iOS or Android device, other than within a web browser?
Oh, well, that's a really good question if you wanted to take things that far. So what this is a web mobile application. You don't have to download it from an app store. It has high accessibility. Now, this was built with Ionic framework. So if you're familiar with the Ionic framework, you probably know that these Ionic apps can be built, for native platforms, right? So I believe to do that, you would have to compile this application in Android Studio, right? You're going to have to use Android Studio to compile the application. It's a totally different process than what we've done here on the web. I personally wanted to avoid that just because, it becomes tedious having to push updates to an app store and having to have everybody go and download an app when they can just go through a web browser, right? Because essentially this is using web technologies anyways. Now, if we're talking about like actual like Android SDK for ArcGIS, that's a totally different discussion and a totally different thing that we're doing here, which requires knowledge. You're going to have to know C Sharp, Java, things like that, right? JavaScript's not going to cut it for that business. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
Yes.
yeah, and
Great.
I just want to add to what Bob's saying, making it as accessible and easy for people to access, especially when you're trying to engage different community groups and organizations and doing all the public components of deep mapping. We found that was really important to not have to require people to have to go off and download a specific app. And Bob can speak to this best, trying to make the behavior identical iOS and Android can also sometimes be challenging. So that was a decision point as a project we made a long time ago to keep it just in the browser.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you ask me, these web applications are definitely where the direction that things are going in, right? Just from an accessibility standpoint.
May I
Okay.
may I ask yet another question?
As many questions as you have, Todd, please feel
So,
free.
so first and foremost, I want to say that this was the session I was most looking forward to at the live session. And so I was disappointed that it didn't occur, but I'm very happy that it is occurring now. I apologize to everyone else on the call that I have all these questions. But anyway, my next question is about licensing. So you put this together, you are sharing this with all of us on the call. Do you have any license restrictions on how other individuals use it now? So if we were to take your code, modify it, and deploy it, are there any restrictions on that?
Ooh, that's a good question. Don, we did come up with some licensing when we launched Cat originally. I don't remember what exactly we licensed it under, but
I
we do not have any license for this specific institute application.
Right. But I would say, Todd, you know, um, this is Bob's intellectual product, so I'm deferring to him on this. But generally the projects have had an open access. I forget which you're right. I forget it wasn't Creative Commons. It was one of the other ones, but something similar to that type of open access use for it. But Bob, we probably should think about that and get that in the repository soon, because that's a good question.
I agree. That's a very good question, Todd. One that I hadn't even thought about.
Yeah, and,
Thank
and
you.
of course, I have no intention of misusing any of this, but I want to make sure that any use cases that we came up with are in line with, and which of course, for the Deep Mapping Institute, I'm sure they would be. I just want to ensure that we are indeed, as Don mentioned, protecting your intellectual property as we use this and modify it and put it out there for public use.
Okay.
Yeah, how about Bob, you and I sit down and deal with that next week?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
All right. Do we have any more questions here before I move on? All right. Best is yet to come. So, when you have a mobile application, where does this go from here? Right? Where do you take this? Right? You should continue customizing your application, colors, logos, images, drop-down menu links, things that are easy. But if you have a developer, you want to hire a developer, you are a developer yourself, or I mean, you really get on my good side, I might help you. So, I mean, you could add building footprints, add and query data. These are some things that we've done. These are some things that we're working on. Of course, Kept Mobile itself doesn't really have data outside of story points, right? We don't have people in place information. There's no census records in here, but we have done some stuff with data on Hamtramck, the mobile version of Hamtramck, right? So I'll just show that. I don't know how many of you have used this or seen it, but, and once again, I'll just make it look like a little mobile app here. Right, this is Hamtramck, Michigan, near Detroit. So we have some building footprints, we have historical maps, and just for the record, the base for this was the Cat Mobile shell that I just went through. I took that shell, made a custom app for the Hamtramck Explorer, and then I added some additional code that would implement building footprints. Okay, so we have some Sanborn maps, some aerial imagery, right? And then, so what's happening here? We have historical building footprints that have been digitized, and you all are familiar with this because you did it in the In-Person Institute day one, I think, in the lab. So all of these building footprints have a building ID attached to them, right? What's also in here is an object catalog, right? So these objects could be, anything, any artifacts or anything like that that were found in these buildings, or that are, I should say, related to these buildings. All of those artifacts have a building ID attached to them. That's the exact connection here. So when you click on a building footprint, you get a list of items that are associated with this building. In this case, they're photographs, right? So this is, something that's basic. It's pretty easy to implement this, right? You simply need footprints and you need a table of items. That's kind of where I'm going with this entire workshop here, is to do this at a minimal level. You need some sort of geometry, like building footprints or points, and then you can use matching IDs to essentially link that to a catalog of objects. And those objects could be anything that you want them to be, right? Pictures, people, stories, places, audio files, oral histories, whatever you want them to be. So basically, this is just a simple example of the Cat Mobile shell with data added. All right. What if you want to even make maybe step up one level, right? Ket Mobile. What could we do with Ket Mobile? We talked about it already, James and I. How do we really make Ket Mobile more of a place-based experience, right? So I think one idea is some sort of nearby tab or what's here functionality, sort of like Google Maps has. But in this case, it's more like what was here, right? Because we're dealing with historical data. So in this case, maybe if the user is out there walking around with their GPS activated, they want to know what's by me, like what's in a 50-foot radius of my current location. Well, clearly there is not much in a 50-foot radius except the Portage Canal of my current location. Where do I want to go? Come on, Google sensors. Do I want to go to Sao Paulo? Luis, I'll see you very soon, okay? Oh, no, I won't. Ugh, poor browser. So sad. Oh, look at that. Okay, so look, I see these people here. Now I'm starting to see people around me who lived here before, right? But who are these people? So I have a nearby tab that populates this. And I can see this. This person lived here in 1917. This was their home, right? These are people near me. And the GPS is, the position is going to update, and so is the items that are in this tab. And I mean, you don't need these little markers here. This is simply just for display, right? And I mean, this is a rough prototype of how this could work. And if you want to take it up one level, you could. I don't have this functionality working at the moment, right? But you could just kind of like long press on the screen, and then same thing. These people would come up within a 50-foot radius of that location where you pressed on. So I think that sort of covers people that want to use GPS and people that don't. But that's a good way. And I mean, you could have a lot of records, right, like this because it's only querying within a small radius, right? All of this data is not actually on this map. It's being pulled from a REST API, right? It's coming in directly from a REST service through a spatial relationship intersects, right? Like you take this like 50-foot buffer. Okay, give me any people or place geocoded people or places that are within a 50-foot radius of the location where I'm standing right now, and send them back to me here in the browser. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of technical speak there, but this is the kind of stuff like if you want this, you either need to be a developer or probably need to hire one, right? You're not going to, get a lot of this kind of interaction. Definitely not with the shell that we just made. So, all right, that's a couple examples. But I have a whole list of examples. And you can see these sweet AI images that Google Gemini made me. I was like, Gemini, put this on an actual tablet. That's pretty good. Like I could tell it's AI, but like in Photoshop, that would have taken me quite some time to produce something like that. And the AI is like just throwing this out in like 10 seconds. Like, here you go, dude. Well, thank you for helping me with my presentation, Google Gemini. Ah, all right. So if you are at the In-Person Institute, you probably already saw some of these. So I won't spend too much time on them. Okay. How am I doing on time here? Pretty good. Okay. So this is just basically a simple example, just like I showed you, but bare bones, right? Bare bones desktop. This is for a Francophone migration project. Where did these French-speaking people live here in the Upper Peninsula in 1910? Right? So we can click on their homes. Sorry, that is not what I'm going through. I think Sarah knew that because she was like, "What are you talking about, dude?" Yeah, you're right. This is where Francophones worked in 1910, not where they lived. So, Sarah and Don could talk about this a little more, like how they set up the data, if anyone's really interested. But, this took geocoded people records and they were broken up into like working classes, right? And then we found sort of like these different places of work, like, I digitized blacksmith shops, mines, barber shops, things like that, and broke these people up. And then Spatial joined them to their nearest place of work. Obviously, there's a lot of problems with that, and it's making an assumption, but that's the kind of data that we have here. And you could be more specific. Like sometimes the census record might tell you, well, this person worked at like, Quincy, number two shaft, and then, well, you would have that kind of information. But it's typically broken up people into their working classes. So if I click on any place of work, I can see people who work there, what they did, their age. I can click on any person and I can get their full record from the 1910 census. Yeah, the 1910 census. So kind of the same thing here, right? You're pulling a building ID that was, in this case, the result of a spatial join, right? You just think about this like you have a ton of little people points all over the place. That's where they live, but you don't see them. This is all happening behind the scenes. Okay. So same thing. This is just the exact same thing. This is actually a repository for this. Okay, so maybe I did this intentionally. You can see I have repositories for all of my code. And no, Todd, I don't have any specific licensing on this. I'm so sorry. I never thought about it. But I do have this stuff available and you can look at it and you may use it. And if you do something really cool with this, please feel free to share. Or if you have some crazy idea where you're like, Bob, I think this would be super cool, maybe I would be interested in that enough to help you make it happen. Um, so here's something, historic building image viewer. I showed, so you can see it right here. I showed you some of you this at the Institute, right? But I want to show it here to, a wider audience. Okay, so maybe you have like a Sanborn map and you ever wonder, I wonder what that building looked like, right? This is some type of sort of like image mapping. I click on this building, I get a dot on the map, right? It's showing me which building is this? What did that building look like? Right? Or if you really want to get crazy, you can click on the building and then it highlights it on the map. And it's almost like when you're zooming around, it's like this image has become spatialized. It's like the map itself. See what I'm doing here? Tell me you've seen something like this before. Tell me you have. Okay, you might have, but this is cool, right? Right. So how does this work
Very
exactly?
cool, Bob. This is very
Yeah,
cool.
it's like a historical Google Street Maps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. I appreciate the kind comments there, Don. Thank you very much.
I've been dreaming about this since like 2011, so this is good stuff.
Don was very impressed with this. He's like, great work, Bob. This is excellent. Ah, okay. So how does this work? Because this is kind of like what we're doing in this workshop, right? As you can imagine, each one of these building footprints, the attribute table, has a field for pixel coordinates, right? Those pixel coordinates come from this particular image, right? So every single building footprint has a pixel coordinate, and then this image, if you're wondering, is hosted on a triple IF image server, right? So you can zoom in, you get the kind of deep zoom. This isn't an extremely high res image, but you get the deep zoom here. And so it's when I click on this, it's putting an overlay using OpenSeaDragon JavaScript plugin, which is essentially what this is right here, right? It's an OpenSeaDragon viewer that is taking a triple IF image URL. So, okay, we know how that side of it works, but how does this side of it work? Okay, this is where things get kind of confusing, right? There are actually polygons over this image. They're invisible, right? Well, very similarly invisible index map, but it's like an index map for an image. So now I have a hosted table on ArcGIS portal. Each of them has coordinates that draws a polygon around each building, right? So they're essentially polygons with an attribute that has, you'll never guess, a building footprint ID, right? So when I click on one of these, the Open Sea Dragon viewer is drawing the polygons from the table when it loads. When I click on one of these, it's querying the building footprints layer for its building footprint ID and then highlighting it. Right, so you could do this without a AAA image server, but you're not going to get like that deep zoom functionality, right? And that's, I think, what really makes this special is being able to zoom around, click around the map, click around the image while it's moving with the map, or being able to click on a building footprint and then zooming into that specific building, right? Okay, let's move along here. Map catalog. Thank you, Jim from Charleston, for bringing this excellent idea to my attention. So this is basically a historical map catalog, and this is kind of like Ket Mobile for desktop, right? That I could see this being useful, like if you have a giant amount of maps, we're talking hundreds, to the point where mobile is just, a huge scroll, or this is essentially a map catalog, but instead of just viewing the index, right, you can view the map itself, you can adjust the transparency. This is actually a newer version of this. It used to use Esri's calcite design, but I changed this to the same Ionic framework because it's just so smooth, and I got that when you zoom around, it shows you again, querying the map's extent, right? These are the maps that are within this extent right now. And you got some filters, or you got like that real fast search, right? It's like searching on the fly. Ooh. Ugh. Yep. All right. All right. All right. It's moving along here. And you like this stuff? You may use it. You want any sort of consultation on how you might include some of these things in your deep map? Please feel free to reach out to me. I'm not done though. All right. So, creating a deep map with out-of-the-box Esri tools. I mean, why do this? Well, because I understand that everyone's not a developer. Everyone doesn't have the time and the resources to really devote to this stuff. And I'm really trying to make an effort with these institutes to cater to that. And there are always, keyfits with Esri out of the box tools. And generally we find that these tools don't work the best for this, right? There's always some type of a trade-off. But I guess what I'm trying to look at here today is it possible, right? Can Esri provide at a minimum enough tools to make some sort of a good historical mapping application or a deep map? Well, the advantages are clear that you don't need coding. It's quick and easy. You can pretty much hire anyone, to come in and maintain this application. They just have to learn Experience Builder. They don't have to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You don't need to hire a developer, all of that. With that said, they're clearly not very customizable, and the user experience, in my opinion, tends to lack, significant limitations there as far as like what I would consider the application's overall flow, right? Yeah, so I mean, to me, like always, the best way to do these deep maps, and that's at least true for now, is definitely custom programming. But let's take a look here at a little experience builder example that I'm working on. And keep in mind, this is a prototype. I've been trying to figure out something like this for a while now, how to actually do this. And I gotta sign in here. All right. So what do we have here? I have a Houghton deep map example. In this case, it's from the year 1949 with 1940 census records, right? This is about more about exploration. What can be done with this? Okay, so right now I have a sidebar that contains 40,000 geocoded census records. You don't see these on the map because they're invisible. There's a lot that I can easily do with this right here. Like if I want to find a person, like I get autocomplete search for all of these people. So like, okay, I get some basic information like who is this person? Where do they live? When were they born? How old are they? What do they do? Right? Or what did they do? I click on one of them, right? It's going to show me on the map where did this person live. So, I mean, we're making pretty good progress here, right? Like this works fairly well for something that I whipped together within about an hour, right? So, next step, click on someone, it highlights a building, full census record pops up. Definitely possible. I'm just not there yet. Now, let's say maybe I want to click on a building and I want to find out who lived in that building, just like I showed you with the other applications. Well, nobody lived in this building. But no, nobody lived in this building. Okay, so a better way to do this might be just spatial join these building footprints and get rid of the ones that don't have people in them. So we'll get there eventually, guys, okay? What? That's because I'm way up in Calumet. This is a Houghton deep map. Okay, so it appears like this is not working, but I still have confidence. I really do. You know what? I know why this isn't working. Like I said, user experience, right? You learn these things. I don't need these Aho people. I want to know anybody that lived in this building. Ta-da! There you go. I can see that there's 4 people that lived in this building. So, same deal, right? Like I want to click on this person. I want to get the census record. Okay. Simple enough. And you could do that with any sort of geocoded data set or how does this work? Okay. So trigger actions are what this is all about, right? Clicking on the building footprints layer filters the geocoded census records layer by building footprint ID. So, okay, that's pretty good. We have some historical data in here. We have some building footprints. Regrettably, what do you get here if you want to compare past to present? You get the swipe tool. I mean, that's fine. You can have transparency sliders if you want to put on the layers widget and everything else. One of the biggest downsides that I found is that there's currently no way, at least that I could figure out, to toggle the visibility of a raster. So if I want to change time period, as far as automatically toggle the visibility of a raster, right? Like let's say I had this for multiple years and I wanted to click on a person whose census was from 1910 and I want to switch the map to 1910. Well, that's not possible that I could find out. So in this case, I'm kind of stuck to make a good user experience with just having this be for 1 year, right? Because otherwise someone's going to have to go into the layers widget and toggle on and off. And, it's just not the user experience that someone really wants. But it's all about like what's really possible with this, and you can share a story too. I mean, this is again not the best user experience. You have to share it on a different map, but it works, right? Right? You can take video, you can record audio right from your computer or phone. So, I mean, you can try it out. Just got to be able to put those coordinates in there from a map click, right? Huh? Yeah. Then we're getting somewhere. But
Bob, would we be able to leave about 15 minutes for questions and discussion?
Don, this is the very last thing that I have.
Okay,
I will be done within the next 5 minutes.
perfect.
Just going to do tests here because we're in such a rush. Oh, it wants my camera. What's going to happen? It won't because I'm on Zoom. Okay, fair enough. No, none of that's going to work, but and there's my story. See, it's not bad, right? It works. So, you know, limitations, but is it possible? Yes, I think it is. All right. Thank you very much. If you like these examples, you can follow me on GitHub, username rcowling, for many more of these great apps. Happy Friday. Any questions?
This is great, Bob. I think be good to get some feedback from folks, things that they kind of maybe Bob's inspired you to think about ways to represent the narratives you're trying to tell, the stories you're trying to tell, the data populations you're trying to represent, landscapes you're trying to represent, things like that. Bob, Gary's got a question for you
All right,
in the chat there.
in the chat.
I'll just read them for you. Can you change the opening location for the layer? He created one and it went to 00 off the coast of Africa. And he wants it to, the initial zoom extent and spatial extent when you create a layer.
Yeah, so that should be at the very start when you create a layer. There should be a map and you zoom in. I'm not 100% sure how you would do it after that. You could always use it and save a web map with that extent, but it's not going to matter in your deep mapping application because you set the extent manually in the code. Does that make sense? Cool.
In the application, you had a couple of tools such as maps, and I can't remember what the other ones were off the top of my head. Are the labels for those configurable? So if you want to call it something other than maps, for instance, layers or whatever, can you change that, or is that hard coded and so those can't be changed?
Well, I mean, so fine, hard coded. You could easily go into the JavaScript or the HTML and edit it. Is it editable through the config.json? No, I don't think so, but I would consider this to be a fairly novice task. So HTML is not too hard to deal with. I think if there's something most people are familiar with, right, it's HTML. When you start to deal with JavaScript, that's a little more advanced, and I may not recommend that. But to change those titles, yeah, you simply need to edit the HTML, and I would say it's fairly obvious where that is just by looking through the code.
So Bob, you showed us a couple of things that you're working on with these prototypes. I'm curious because I mean my head is thinking about some some different things that could be done, but like what do you see? What's the project with these tools that you'd really like to undertake next? Like what do you think is the next thing that these tools might be able to do from a deep mapping perspective that you think would be just really exciting and that you think is maybe realistic?
That's an interesting question. I would like to implement the image mapping tool right into something like Cat Mobile,
Mhm.
right? So you could do it right out there in the field. Um, Another idea I've had is when you're out there with your mobile device, what are you actually looking at, right? I would like to sort of query data based on the orientation of the device itself, right?
Mhm.
What is this building that I'm facing right now? So, that's more of like a AR thing, but with JavaScript and these APIs, we do have that sort of information, like your phone, your device's orientation, right? You see it all the time with like, typically these are more of like native apps, but Google Maps, a little arrow that circles around clockwise or counterclockwise your GPS dot, right? That shows you which direction you're traveling in. Well, I would like to see that something, well, what exactly, not only which direction am I traveling in, but what am I looking at, right? What is there? So, I mean, I think that's typically where I would like to see this go. Doing more work with images and then doing more work with like spatial location itself, like for more, as we talked about, for more of like an actual place-based experience.
Yep, I'll second that. I think the the dream of having Google Street View historical version is is really, I think, compelling to getting people to think about and having that be data driven, eh? So it's not just, start with the image, just start with the picture, like what Bob's already figured out how to do, and take that even next step so that you get a representation of that place based on data that represents the way that place would have looked.
Or I mean, what if you fed one of those old historical photographs into ChatGPT or some other AI, right? ChatGPT might not be up to this, but you say take X street in this photo and render from the photo an immersive, a virtual reality rendering from street level of a person 5 foot 8 inches high. And then I mean, could it do that?
I don't think so, but I would to say more like it can't do it yet, right? We're getting there quicker than anyone thought. So I would certainly not rule something like that out. It's AI is fairly crazy what it's capable of already. So I'm trying to imagine it in the next like 5, 10 years.
Other questions, ideas from folks?
I had a question, Don. I'm wondering with this mobile application, are there any technical requirements for specific phones to be able to open it? Because, spending my time in Dominica, not everybody does have a smartphone or an iPhone. So I'm just wondering, like, are there any limitations as far as like what type of phone you might have to use to you know, open the application up?
Sure, good question. So it's browser based, right? Limitations would be mostly based on the browser. It works in all major browsers that I've tested: Chrome, Firefox, Edge, Safari.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some minimum amount of RAM, and obviously you need a certain amount of data throughput to make it, you know, work in a way that's going to feel comfortable. But I don't know, Bob, we haven't done any real testing on what those base minimum levels would be, eh?
Well, I mean, like a phone that was really old, right? Just isn't going to have graphic support for even interactive mapping, at least not very well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, that's fair, but I think that would apply to almost any map in general, not just our application.
Yeah.
And I'll say, it also depends on the cell service or the, internet access that you have. Because even right with this group, when we were using Ket Mobile and Calumet, people always encounter some problems in Calumet because the cell service is not always great. So that's something to keep an eye on too, that we're always working on.
I was thinking of the same thing, Sarah, and it makes me wonder, like, if you're using Google Maps in your sort of home area and you say, well, I need directions to this other city over here, it will sometimes prompt you and say, would you like to download the maps for that area that you're going to, right? So that you don't have to be dependent on the cell signal, the data connection, right? And it would be interesting to think about whether it's possible to do an analog of that for a deep mapping mobile app that is targeting a really rural area.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about. There's a way to cache it
Mhm.
or something. That would need more power and storage and
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't know if you could tap into it, but there are ways with other Esri apps like Survey 123 and Field Maps to download the base maps and have those ready to go already. And if you
Mm.
take that file and embed it into your app somehow, you probably could use it offline, but that would take configuring on the actual mobile app, the mobile device that you're using to do that, because that's what you have to do with the Esri apps.
Yeah.
Mm.
We did manage to get that to work by creating our own base maps that were historical maps to be able to do that with Survey 123 back in the day. But yeah, trying to use that same model and get it into what Bob's done would be interesting to think about. And then you multiply that by the number of time periods and it gets to be a lot. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've thought about offline maps before, but you start to get into how many gigabytes, how many, maybe even more than that, depending. Some of these tile caches are huge. You have hundreds of maps. It's really not reasonable to do that. Even like a lot of the like field mapping tools, you either have to like upload a mobile package or select a little tiny chunk, and then it caches that, right? Because it's so big.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and most of like the actually now that I think about it, Martin, what that does, what Google Maps is doing is actually just giving you vectors. They're not
Mhm.
actually giving you rasters anyway when you do the pre-downloaded maps. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
which is way smaller. So that's interesting thing to think about though. Other questions, other thoughts before we maybe just do one or two quick reminders and no? Okay. Well, let's all give Bob another hand for his amazing work. Thank you, Bob. We really appreciate all the work you put into this.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We will, I'll get the slides from Bob. You've already got the guides themselves already accessible to you on the Google Drive, but we'll get the slides, we'll get the video put together and accessible to everybody. So you'll have all these things as resources. Our Slack universe is still there. It's, we're not using it a whole lot, but it is there, accessible. Some of you are using it, but do please reach out to any of us there if you want some help moving along your mobile project. And then look for something from us soonish. Hey, Sarah.
Soonish.
Soonish. With to get the one-on-one meeting scheduled. Okay, with everybody in October. Krista, Dan, any other things or Sarah that we need to go over?
Oh, I have one thought. One, if I could just add one more nudge or plea to those of you, for those of you who are here for the in-person part, if you didn't fill out the our survey, can I just add one more nudge to ask you to do that? We could really, really use your feedback. And it will help, with this whole group for all of us moving forward and in our discussion in December when we really get to talk about what we're all going to do together. So I know it's hard to, we seem like we're in a different world than in July and it seems like a long time ago, but maybe a little perspective, actually a little time away, might have given you some good ideas. So if you wouldn't mind taking maybe 10 minutes, we would really appreciate it. The link was in Actually, it would be in the email even that Don sent yesterday. If you scroll down, it should be in there. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your time, your energy, and we'll see all of you in October. Oh, Sarah's got something.
There's a question from Jonathan in the chat. When are we submitting drafts or internal review for the social science history special topics?
Oh, end of the calendar year.
Thanks,
Yeah, and I was hoping to have a schedule update from you for you from the journal, but we're still going back and forth on some logistical things. So in October for sure, when we meet, I will have some updates on timing for for follow-up drafts and publication schedule and stuff like that. So good question, Jonathan. Thank you. Okay, is that it? We're good? All right. Well, take care, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thanks so much, everybody. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.